So I'm going to talk about Mike Waskosky for a second. We have about 1 minute. He spoke at Eclipse of Disclosure last year, and he's back this year. And if you got, raise your hand if you guys have seen Mike talk before. Okay, he dives really deep. Okay, so you guys are going to have some notes going on your phone. Maybe you brought something to write with. Get ready, because this is going to be a huge download. What was really interesting last year at Eclipse of Disclosure is how the talks seemed to fit in together. It was amazing. It was a total synchronicity. So keep watching for how these talks are going to overlay into each other. Mike is going to be talking about the Law of One. Raise your hand if you've read the Law of One. Okay. Everyone, perfect. So this is channeled material, and Mike knows a lot about it. It's super dense, and as we know, as you were going through it, it's like you read one sentence and you need to research for like, you know, a day in order to understand what that means. So we're very honored to have Mike here today. He's going to be talking about that and genetic destiny. So give it up for Mike Waskosky. Thank you.
I originally thought about calling this presentation the Great Experiment because recently Harry Reid has been explaining that there's been some changes with genetic experiment programs that were conducted by extraterrestrials, and that some of those programs are coming to an end. And he says that the extraterrestrials are saying these programs were called by the extraterrestrials as a part of a grand experiment, and I thought that that was very interesting. It's very close to what the Law of One calls the Great Experiment, which they call the implementation of a veil over our conscious awareness. So it's kind of like a deliberate block to our awareness that's instituted for the purposes of our spiritual growth. And I thought I should try to connect some dots with this through the genetic experiment systems. And this is kind of a lot of topics, but you'll see how it all fits together pretty soon here. So I should say a little bit about me first, if people don't know. I do have a YouTube channel called Mind Alchemy, where I've done other Law of One presentations. And if you're interested in more of a general overview and introduction to the Law of One, that's a good place to look. You see this picture of me here. This was a protest we did, my meetup group that I started in Colorado Springs. Every year, Colorado Springs hosts the Space Symposium, which is the largest space conference in the world. All the big space contractors come together with the military. And so we try to get creative with those guys and hand out a lot of DVDs and flyers about the secret space program. And so disclosurecolorado.org is our website. And if you live in Colorado Springs, you can attend our meetup group. We typically have a lot of people coming now, but we're getting bigger rooms to meet in, so it's pretty cool. A lot of people come with like incredible contactee stories, incredible experiences of essentially a nature which is corroborating a lot of the things we're hearing in general through shows like Cosmic Disclosure, but to actually recognize with the meetup group that there's people all around you with such incredible experiences is really eye-opening. And meetup.com is one way that I say it's really great to get connected with people in your community. And I also started a website. I'm a web developer, by the way, professionally web developer and app developer. And so obviously, you can see I'm website focused a little bit here. The newearth.network is a website I started as an alternative to meetup.com, but it also lists meetup groups in your area from meetup.com. So if you're interested in just checking out what might be going on in your area in one place, you can go to newearth.network and see what you might want to get connected to. Full Disclosure International is another website I just started to try to share the template of what I've done with my meetup group in Colorado Springs. And I'm interested in helping everyone really get started. If they have any questions or concerns about starting a group in their area, we can help them out. And I also have a map on there that shows internationally all the different meetup groups and local organizations that are affiliated with disclosure efforts. And so you can check out the map on there and see if anything's near you. And if there isn't, then I recommend you start your own group or connect with friends and start a group. And then let me know about it and I'll add it to that map. And disclosureinstitute.org is a website I started to host all of the resources that I've been using. I've been passing out DVDs to friends and family for over 10 years now. And I found that really, it's just been kind of my own thing, and I wanted to share it with more people, so I've found a way to do that through disclosureinstitute.org. So you can download a lot of great DVDs that really help wake people up fast. It's really amazing how great DVDs can be, and there's so many advantages to DVDs still that aren't existing with YouTube videos, because like when people have DVDs, they're more likely to just sit down in front of their TV and watch it and wake up with a more of a curriculum process. Disclosuresupport.org is a website that was mentioned by Vivian Davis at Eclipse of Disclosure. She announced this project to kind of be a directory of mental health professionals and counselors. If anyone is having very dramatic experiences that are difficult to deal with, you can use this website to help find, to help you find somebody who you might want to talk to about your experiences. And you should sign up there too. We're going to be announcing more with that. I'm working with Vivian on a larger index there that we're going to call Awakening Support that's going to be announced soon. So if you're a practitioner, you should look for that email soon discussing some of the changes we'll be making. DisclosureViews.org is a website I'm announcing for the first time today, which I'm very excited about. I'll talk a little bit later in the presentation. And what I've done with this website is I've created a way to easily find your congressman, contact your congressman through a very simple online free fax form, and use the templates and resources I'm providing in order to very easily start a dialogue with your congressman and try to get Congress more involved. And then so once Congress is more involved in the ET issue, we can figure out, is anyone saying anything publicly about their views on the ET issue? And then I can use this website, disclosureviews.org, to document that, and we can sort of collectively work together to push Congress more towards open hearings on the issue. And you can find me on Facebook or on Still or Mike Waskosky, and I finally created MikeWaskosky.com. If you can't remember any of these URLs, you just want to find everything in one place. So what I want to talk about today, general overview, I'm going to talk about what the veil is in the Law of One, which they also call the first great experiment. And are we an experiment? Should we see ourselves as an experiment? And whose experiment should we see ourselves as? And how does this veiling process help us evolve spiritually? Why is this so significant to the universe that there be a veiling? And I want to talk about ET disclosure is just one form of this unveiling that's built in the fabric of reality. And one way that they describe this fabric of reality is through the archetypes of the tarot, which are the major arcana of tarot cards. And you see here, this is an example of the High Priestess card, and you see that she's kind of has a veil over her face. And also here you can see that she has a cloth on with a lot of pictures of fruit on there, and they're trying to draw a connection there between the bearing of fruit and the connections with breaking through the veil of our consciousness. I'm going to explain why we need disclosure now more than ever, and a little bit more about how you can get involved to accelerate us towards a full disclosure. So first of all, I know a lot of you already know about the Law of One, so I won't spend much time introducing this. But this is obviously what I think some of the highest quality ET channeling, really a conversation with an extraterrestrial that I've ever come across. This was performed under very strict scientific and spiritual protocols, and it was very, very beyond human intelligence. I've not read any other book that comes close to this kind of material. As Teresa mentioned, it's very, very dense and very, very incredibly detailed. And I would say this is the most comprehensive dialogue to explain the nature of reality and everything about the nature of reality. And it's been painstakingly re-reviewed and re-reviewed because the audio recordings are still available. And so what people have done now is actually created a new book. The L&L Research, the organization associated with the material, has just published a couple months ago a new volume called The Raw Contact, Teaching the Law of One. And so what they've done is they reduced what was 5 books now into 2 books. And so I really recommend picking up these books if you haven't yet made the purchase of this material. It's really incredible. And this is, I kind of find it funny that most times when you get like a new edition of a channel material, it becomes like less close to the original channeling. But this is actually way, way more close to the original channeling, because what they've done is they, and I did this too, I re-listened to all the original audio, and people kind of crowdsourced, although most of it was done by a man named Toby Wheelock, but we worked together to try to make the most accurate transcription possible. And believe it or not, the more accurate you get, the more some of it makes sense. Even though the original 5 books are still very high quality, I'd throw those out. Those are really good books too. But anyway, you can get those at LL Research or bringforth.org. And some quick disclaimers before I dive into the material is that this is not an introductory overview. As I said, you could check out my YouTube channel if you want to learn more. And this is just my opinions and personal interpretations. I'm not intending to represent anyone else's opinions or interpretations, and I may state things as facts even though they're not. These are just my opinions. And I would obviously recommend ignoring anything that does not resonate with you and just take from this what you feel is most valuable. So the basics of the Law of One cosmology would be that everything is one, all is one, and it's one identity. It's the infinite creator. We are part of this one identity. And all of our experience reality was based in a single original thought. Everything came from a thought, and that thought led to distortions of that thought. And so everything that we experience is called a distortion, which is kind of a strange word, but you kind of get used to seeing the word distortion to describe kind of everything. And they say infinity decided to explore, and I should clarify when I say they, I'm talking about Ra as the being that was being communicated with. I should go back one more time. This picture is Don Elkins in the middle. He was the guy asking the questions. The woman on the left is Carla Ruckert. She was doing the channeling, and the guy on the right was doing the transcribing. So Don Elkins was very scientifically minded, and he was asking very incredible questions about the nature of reality. And Ra was this consciousness that was expressing itself as a conglomerate of intelligence, but was essentially kind of one race. And what they call the sixth density of consciousness. I won't have time to get into all that, but they say infinity in the very beginnings of our universe decided to explore finity or manyness. And then from that exploration, that led to the principles of free will, love, and light as being the fundamental distortions that created all of the manifested reality we observe. And they say this created all the different space and time dimensions and all the densities of consciousness that we often talk about. And so essentially this created the galaxies, which are also super intelligences, which are very loving intelligences they call the logos. And those loving intelligences create the stars, which are the sub-logoi. And those stars, it would seem, create planets and people. One angle I want to take today is explain how the universe is always experimenting. And it's very difficult to describe what was going on at the beginnings of the galaxy, but it was classified as an experiment. And the Ra says that the beginnings of the universe, basically, there were different galaxies experimenting in different ways with archetypes, which are aspects of an infinite mind, which, as they were playing around with this, they made different discoveries about what works best to help all the consciousness of the universe come back together into one. And they gave an example of how some of the experiments played out. They said one particular archetype was catalyst that they were experimenting with, and another was experience. Catalyst is something that leads to experience. And in another galaxy, they were experimenting more with catalyst and transformation. There was more of a tie between what was brought to an entity and then the process of transforming from that. So the way they explain this is, in one of these cases, the methods whereby experience was processed was further aided, but the fruits of experience less aided. In the second case, the opposite was true. And so this is really hard to imagine what this would be like, but I mean, I'm sure you can imagine right now we're processing a lot of experience and we can think about what is our experience. But this was a relatively new concept, at least to our universe. In the previous universe that existed prior to this one, there was actually not as much a strong concept of experience or transformation. It was more of a direct evolution process. And so there was an early period of time when they were experimenting with these archetypes that they started to recognize there was an issue with some of the beings that were living in these planets and these galaxies. And they said that originally there were the logi, the galaxies had a plan for activation of entities, which was what they say without recourse to the prior application of free will. And what is meant by prior application of free will is that beings didn't have to want to evolve. They were given the energies necessary to allow them to evolve. And they said, consider the tendency of those who are divinely happy, to have little urge to alter or better their condition. This is the possibility of love of other selves and service to other selves, but there is the overwhelming awareness of the Creator in itself, in the self. The connection with the Creator is that of the umbilical cord. The security is total. Therefore, no love is terribly important. No pain is terribly frightening. No effort, therefore, is made to serve for love or to benefit from fear. And so the result of this was what they say incredibly long cycles of evolution because people were not given the proper catalyst. But this led to what they call the Great Experiment or the Unveiling. And they say that when they made free will paramount, this led to a wider quality and variety of experience of the Creator. But in order to give us all free will to this degree, they had to create a veiling between the conscious and unconscious or the deep mind to give us kind of like a blank slate of consciousness. So it's like when we're born, we don't have memory of our past life, we don't understand anything really. We have to go through and process ourselves what we actually want based on this lack of awareness, really. And so this led to what they call the service to self path, or negative entities. This negative entities didn't exist, or it's what we call negative, so-called negative. And they say the saga of polarity, its consequences and limits were unimagined until experienced. And the purpose of this polarity is to develop the potential to do work, just like in any kind of magnetic systems. You have two strong poles, and that can create the conflict to create more work happening, more things are happening. But in this context of having a veil over our consciousness, this can lead to a greater evolution of our spirit. And they say the desire to know that which was unknown drew people to dreaming and to the gradual opening to all different balancing mechanisms that lead to adepthood, that lead to a higher spiritual evolution. It's this desire to know that which is unknown that pulls us up out of our own kind of ignorance. And the work of the mind and its transformation involves a progressive lifting of the great veil between the conscious and deep minds. So this is essentially a fundamental archetype of how we evolve, is to work through this veil that exists, that's blocking off the unconscious awareness. And so, as a recap, the effects of these veiling experiments were essentially people having a desire to know that which is unknown, the service to self or negative entities. This can lead to deception, confusion, and chaos. Now we have the appearance of mistakes, scarcity, and separation becoming possible. We have enslavement, disillusionment, and aimless souls in this universe. But this also led to significantly more rapid spiritual evolution in the universe as we know it today. And I think it's important to recognize this veiling. What the unconscious mind is also a little hard to understand. This veiling is not just something that we try to penetrate down into, but the unconscious mind is speaking back through us through all of manifested reality. They say that all that we perceive seems to be consciously perceived, but this is not the correct supposition. All that we perceived is perceived as catalyst unconsciously. And by the time the mind begins its appreciation of catalyst, by the time we actually recognize what's happening to us, that catalyst has been filtered through the veil, and in some cases much is veiled in the most apparently clear perception. So one example they used to explain this is the example of cancer. They say that if a catalyst, let's say anger, is not used by our mind, if we're not recognizing that we have to go through this experience of anger and do something with it, then that can filter through to the body and manifest as some form of physical distortion. And the more efficient the use of this mental catalyst, the less physical distortion there is to be found in our body. And they say these imbalances of a destructive nature show the body is acting as a teaching resource for self-revelation, and illnesses such as cancer are very amenable to self-healing once the mechanism of the destructive influence has been grasped by the individual. So it's really like the unconscious mind in every way is kind of a manifestation, what the physical world is a manifestation of this unconscious mind that everything is emanating from. And we're just getting a small sliver in front of our faces, and we can hope that the conscious mind is now perceiving it. But there are ways to go deeper. And they say magical ability in general is the ability to consciously use the so-called unconscious. So there are many techniques people can use to essentially gain more awareness and more control over their lives. And I think I have time. I could read this quote about the nature of the mind. The mind they often describe as being like a tree. You know, the conscious is at the very top, and then as you go down, you get more to the roots of the mind, which are shared between us as one giant mind. The mind is a complex which reflects the inpourings of the spirit and the outpourings of the body, which is also described as kundalini or chakra energy. It contains what you know as feelings, emotions, and intellectual thoughts, and its more conscious complexities higher up. Moving further down the tree of mind, we see the intuition, which is the nature of the mind more in contact or in tune with the total beingness complex, all of the unconscious functions like our heartbeat, everything going on in our body that we don't normally have to think about. Moving further down the roots of mind, we find the progression of consciousness which gradually turns from the individual self to the racial memory. Now we're getting into a part of the mind which is shared between our entire race. And then to the cosmic influxes, we go out into space with cosmic consciousness of this infinite connected mind. And this becomes then, our consciousness can then, when we go that far down, become a direct contact of that shuttle that they call the spirit complex. And this spirit complex, once we're working with it consciously, is the channel whereby conscious may be funneled to the gateway of intelligent infinity through the balanced intelligent energy of body and mind. And this is like tapping into total God consciousness, which allows miracles to take place. The paranormal healing ability, for example, like all other paranormal abilities, is effected by the opening of a pathway or shuttle into intelligent infinity through this process I just described. And it's the right of everyone who achieves this to choose the manner of their leaving of the density. So, for example, people can actually choose to become ascended masters or leave the planet, but they actually say that most people who achieve this choose not to because of the strong desire to use this experience to aid others. They say perceptions of intelligent infinity, if you have this experience, range from a limitless joy to a strong dedication to service to others while in the incarnated state. Most often, people will see this experience as one of unspeakable profundity. And so one other way that they describe this experience is a process of reaching a sense of the consecrate or hallowed nature of everyday creations and activities. And another place in the material they describe this as seeing everything in terms of the sacramental nature of each experience. So I think this is an important point to meditate on, that seeing everything as its divinity is significant in achieving total balance, the consecrate or hallowed nature of everyday creations and activities. And the center of our heart is actually very much a key to achieving this. They say that opening your heart creates a springboard. Really, really focusing on unconditional love creates the springboard towards an infinite intelligence. And it may take many, many essays into compassion before true universal love is the product of the attempted opening and crystallization of this all-important love energy center, which is the springboard. But it's important to recognize that the universe can't really push us into enlightenment, and they say it's impossible to help another being directly achieve this kind of thing. It's only possible to make catalyst available in whatever form, the most important being the radiation of realization of oneness with the Creator from the self, as Bridget was talking about, I think. The less important being information such as we share with you. Actually, this kind of stuff is not as important as reaching this state. We cannot offer shortcuts to enlightenment. Enlightenment is of the moment, is an opening to the intelligent infinity, and it can only be accomplished by the self for the self. So with that in mind, this can kind of give us a context of why the universe is simply doing a lot of experiments. It can't make us evolve, we have to choose to. So the universe is trying all types of things to get us to grow. The sun serves as one superconsciousness of the kinds of archetypes that set up the basic fundamental parameters of how evolution occurs. But higher beings, higher extraterrestrial groups, such as are called the Confederation in the material, are helping us with many different experiments that they use in order to have more of a involvement in what's going on down here. And they have their own governing body called the Council of Saturn that Corey Goode has been talking about recently, which is kind of the body that helps decide some of the big events and what extraterrestrials are doing, so that it doesn't infringe on our overall free will big picture. And Corey Goode has also described something very interesting called the Muhammad Accords, and he said that this was essentially a program to very significantly limit open contact between extraterrestrial groups and humanity, beginning around the time of Muhammad, around 800 AD. And this, I believe this would be what we would call a Council of Saturn approved experiment by the Law of One material. And I think that this kind of experiment is really significant in showing, really it's just another kind of layer of a veil that we have to break through to recognize extraterrestrials are even real. It's another level for us to desire to know that which is unknown by not having extraterrestrials come down and say, yes, I'm real. Now we actually have to do a bit of work for it, and in the process we discover all the spiritual principles necessary to break through all the veils, all the illusions that we're dealing with. So, and we also do experiments ourselves all the time, every day. We want to be more happy. We figure out what we can do in our lives to be more happy, to bring more love, light, and joy in our lives. And so, we try to become less swayed by different distractions. What is a distraction? What's not a distraction? So every one of us is a part of this great experiment. And the experiments are always evolving. Many Confederation races have directly interacted with humanity to try to accelerate our progress. The Confederation became concerned, they say, 25,000 years ago, though, at our very slow progress rate, and they started experimenting with with more direct contact with the Atlanteans, for example, and in the case of Ra with the Egyptians. And now even the Law of One is said by Ra to be an offshoot of some of the things that were set up by them back in the Egyptian times that they still have to correct the distortions from. And Ra mentions that there were genetic experiments done by the Confederation also many thousands of years ago and likely ongoing. And I'll give some examples of that in a minute here. One of the most interesting things David Wilcock has mentioned is some research by Dr. John Hawkes, which reveals that human DNA evolution has been moving 100 times faster in the last 5,000 years than at any other time in our history. This is causing a 7% change in the DNA structure. And I do have to wonder how much of this rapid genetic change has been occurring as a result of some of these genetic programs that Corey Goode has been talking about, which I'll touch on right now. So Corey Goode, right away, when he first started coming out talking about on Cosmic Disclosure about his experience, he was talking about a meeting where there were 22 different extraterrestrial groups talking about their genetic programs that they were implementing on humanity. And this can kind of sound a little shocking to a lot of people that this kind of thing is going on, this degree of manipulation without us really knowing about it. But I'll explain why I think this has been, at least to some degree, within the parameters of cosmic law. And Corey Goode says that they were often trying to explain the proof of what their genetic coding manipulation was doing for us, but this had been going on for many thousands of years, and even by groups much, much older than these 22 groups that are currently in this council. And they said that many of these groups are not even existing anymore, that were originally creating our genetic structure. So, anybody who tries to say there was just one type of ET that created us, it does not make any sense in the context of this continuous shifting genetic landscape that we are living in. The Super Federation, as I said, was claiming that they're part of a grand experiment, which is very similar to what one would say is the great experiment. The DNA was being upgraded. Our DNA is upgraded through multiple methods, and one example of that would be like apparently viruses that we can get that kind of like spread around everybody. They can actually have a side effect of giving us a kind of genetic upgrade, a collective genetic upgrade. And they say that, I think Corey and Emery have talked about how some of these genetic upgrades can actually give us enhanced abilities. It can actually make us better at coping with different aspects of our environment. And there's also a potential for like certain conditions such as high energy or even potentially like solar activity in the near future could give us more expanded abilities that we don't currently have as a result of some of this genetic work that's been done behind the scenes. One other form of experiment I could touch on is the nature about the human body itself in general was said to be a kind of experiment by the galaxy, that we even selected this kind of bipedal form where we're standing on 2 feet, kind of like upright monkeys. They say that this was a process of the galaxy being interested in intensifying the veiling process by offering to our physical vehicles the near complete probability for the development of speech taking precedence over telepathy. Because we can talk, we're more likely to try to talk. I think if we were all born without vocal cords, we'd be likely all telepathic. The opposable thumb was seen as an excellent means of intensifying the veiling process so that rather than rediscovering the powers of the mind, we would be drawn to the making, holding, and using of physical tools. And you can see how something like that might even lead to more warfare and people fighting against each other, very dramatic catalysts. Obviously, we're also a lot weaker than a lot of animals. I mean, if you think about a gorilla out in the jungle, just kind of like, munching on a bunch of leaves and fruits and not needing a home, like, why couldn't we be a little bit more like that? Why do we need? But they say that the weakening of the physical vehicle from the second density form to the third density form was designed to distort us towards a predisposition to deal with each other. And the reason is, the lessons which approach a knowing of love can be begun. Because the quickest way to learn is to deal with other selves. This is a much greater catalyst than dealing with the self. And so basically this experiment has in its structure the need for us to interact and go through conflict, to have to learn these lessons of love and forgiveness. This is a big part of what these experiments were about. But now the landscape is changing. It's moving from third density, fourth density. We're not in the same territory anymore. And they say, Corey Goode announced in January, I believe, that he had a meeting in which it was discussed that this tinkering with our genetics and our spirituality that went on for many millennia, the super federation involved in this would soon be disbanded, as had been done in countless other star systems, and this was in full accordance with cosmic law. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit, what I think might be meant by cosmic law, why it's time now for these programs to be ending. But Corey said, humanity is now in control of our own future genetically and spiritually. So this is a really significant change. And I think one way of looking at it might be like if you have a pet, that's a second density, but the law of one actually says it's very, very beneficial to have pets because of the fact that these beings are right at that point in their evolution where they're almost ready to jump up to third density. They're ready to be self-aware. So it's really helpful to have pets. But think about, like, if your pet wants to run away, you don't want to just let it run away. But if that was a person, you know, somebody might say, you've enslaved that guy, you got to let him go. But like, imagine if you could give your pet like shots or something, like intelligence serums to like make it more and more intelligent. And at what point of that intelligence level of your pet would you say, you know, I think this being is pretty darn aware of itself and its situation right here, and I might have to give him access, give him a key to the house if he wants to leave. But I think this is kind of what's going on with the transition from third to fourth density, where now we're becoming able to understand genetics, understand how we might even need to adjust our genetics to have a more beneficial spiritual experience. And so these beings who have been kind of managing this show behind the scenes, we don't need them to be doing it, and it's kind of messed up for them to keep doing it now that we kind of understand what's going on. And that's why I think all this had to go down recently, where they had to be kind of given this understanding, this is the time of humanity to move on, and it's time to close down these programs to give humanity assistance in taking hold of its own evolution. One example of a program, they also said that there were cosmic agreements that had been made and broken over oceans of time relating to these experiments. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And I think one example of where a genetic experiment went wrong, at least in the context of what was intended by it, they say Yahweh, which is the word given to God in the Old Testament, actually, they say that this being was originally it is a very, very positive being that originally was trying to help people through a variety of methods on Earth. And the very first form of communication they were doing, Ra is calling genetic. They say this was a genetic communication originally, and I thought that's a very curious and interesting way of describing genetic work as communication. But they say what they were trying to do was give people heightened physical senses in order to sharpen their experiences and also strengthen their mind in order to promote the ability to analyze the experiences better. And so the reason they were doing this was for the potential for the more speedy development of the spiritual complex. And I'll be talking a little bit more about why there's such a strong relationship between the analysis of experience and our abilities to look at what we've been going through and our own evolution, our spiritual evolution. But what happened with these experiments? They said that Yahweh's experiments were a decided failure due to the fact that rather than assimilating the law of one as was intended, having this beefed up mind and body was a great temptation for those experiencing this, those who are strong, intelligent, etc., to see themselves as elite or different and better than other selves. And this is one of the techniques of service to self. This is a negative thing to see yourself as better than others. So those of the Orion group, who have been sometimes called the Draco, were able to, for the first time, make serious inroads upon the consciousness of the planet. This allowed the Orion group to form the concept of the Holy War. This is a seriously distorted perception. There were many wars like this of a destructive nature. So you can see how very quickly something that can appear to be good for us can very, very quickly go in the wrong direction when people aren't using what they have in the proper way. So the Orion group was able to impress upon peoples that the name Yahweh, this is very interesting, the name Yahweh has been kind of used for different purposes. And they say that because of all this negativity that was a result of this, they were able to twist around the name Yahweh to mean this being associated for elitism, essentially negativity. So that's why I think the Old Testament can kind of be kind of confusing. Is this a good God, or this is a God of war? But so this is, I think you can understand, this is why genetic experiments to the nature of our being are kind of like tightrope walking, because we have many different aspects of our mind working together. We have the left and right brain kind of thinking, And they say that the rational or analytical mind that we use might actually have more of a possibility of pursuing the negative orientation due to the fact that too much order by its essence is negative. And you can kind of understand this in corporate America in a lot of ways, that when people make boxes, well, the company exists to make money, we'll just keep doing what makes more money. They can very quickly push aside all forms of compassion because they're just using their rational analysis to see what needs to be done to fulfill what they think is right in that rational sense. But they say this same ability to structure abstract concepts and to analyze experiential data may actually be the key to rapid positive polarization, to growth and lessons of love and forgiveness, when you can think about it that much. Those whose analytical capacities are predominant have somewhat more to work with in polarizing. But they also say the function of intuition is to inform intelligence. And if the unbridled predominance of intuition tends to keep an entity away from the greater polarizations due to the vagaries of intuitive perception. So you can see these two types of brain structures need to be carefully balanced for the purposes of polarization and illumination. Because if the rational mind does not accept the value of the intuitive faculty, the illumination will be dramatically stifled. So why is analyzing our experience through this rational analysis process so very crucial? Basically, this is a process of opening up and unblocking our energy centers in our chakra system that I'll try to explain a little bit here. The proper role of every entity in this density is to experience all things desired, to analyze, understand, and accept these experiences, distilling from them the love and light within them. And in order to fully awaken our energy, every experience has to be observed, experienced, balanced, accepted, and seated within. And I think this is the most helpful explanation of the energy centers, the chakra system, I've ever seen. And I think a lot of people miss the fact that there are different types of perception that are representing each different energy center. And the way that you're understanding your world can be an indication of where blockages might be occurring in your energy field and how you can break through. They say every experience has to be sequentially understood. First in terms of survival, then in terms of personal identity, which would be the orange or the second chakra, then in terms of social relations, the solar plexus, then in terms of universal love, the heart chakra, then in terms of how the experience may beget free communication, the throat chakra, then in terms of how the experience may be linked to universal energies, the third eye, and finally in terms of the sacramental nature of each experience, which, as I mentioned before, is the process of opening the gateway to an intelligent infinity. They have another way of describing this that they call the inner seeking is meeting the attracted cosmic prana. And this is the process of dissolving all illusions when you finally break through all of your blockages. So what are chakras really? They are basically the meeting place of our inner and outer natures, which, as I just described, is essentially the energy level of our perceptions. So what does the inner and outer nature mean? So the outer nature is space. We recognize this. We're walking around in physical space-time. But the inner nature was what they call the metaphysical dimensions or the time-space dimensions. This is where all of time is splayed out in 3 dimensions, and it's not a linear thing that we're in with time. Time is a 3-dimensional thing where we can pick and choose experiences. It's not deterministic. We just go based on where our metaphysical energy is leading us. It's not based on, like atoms bouncing off of each other and deciding, well, now inside of his brain he's going this direction, so he keeps going this direction. No, this is something in a whole different set of dimensions. Our metaphysical mind is actually working to decide what's going to happen, and then it will actually happen in time as a result of that energy. So the energy center balance is a process of changes to the mind that correspond also to the body's magnetic fields. This is why things like yoga, qigong, tai chi, all these different energy practices people are doing are so incredibly helpful, because it's not just about some type of physical exercise you're getting. It's about the energy fields that correspond to breaking through these imbalances that help the mind continue to grow. And also they say the energy centers are essentially our ability to represent our level of ascension. So we want to keep working on our energy centers to be able to ascend faster. But another way of explaining the nature of the metaphysical dimensions in time-space, I like to look at it as in terms of like a movie or a stage. If you can imagine that we're all in a movie, Imagine that you can have a choice of modifying the scenery in the movie or modifying the script. The script of the movie is like time-space, where you're determining the events. The events that are going to take place in the future will actually be completely rewritten if you want them to in the script, because you are both the author of the script now and the physical scenery. So what would you care about most in such a situation? Would you care about the plot? Would you care about how you identify with the characters in this movie? Would you care about having a happy ending to the movie? So I'm trying to emphasize here that our metaphysical self is the writer of this play, and we can decide how it will go. The stage is just a way to facilitate the story, and this may or may not lead to a kind of inspiration or satisfaction in the end. But if we can rewrite the script and do more through doing more of the inner work, eventually all of the scenery around it will change, because the scenery follows the script. When the script calls for a new scene change, a world full of advanced exotic technologies and wonderful, harmonious living, then the environment has to match that script. So another example they use to describe the nature of this relationship is to consider the shopper entering the store to purchase food to eat for a week. It's unknown to us, to Ra, as they scan our future, whether we'll shop at one store or another store, what we'll choose. They can only name some of the items that are available for our choosing. At this time, we have many items which are causing us distress, and thus seeking and service opportunities are offered by these. But there is always one container in that store of peace, love, light, and joy. This vortex may be small, but to turn one's back upon it is to forget the infinite possibilities of the present moment. Could your planet polarize towards harmony in one fine, strong moment of inspiration? Yes, my friends, it is not probable, but it is ever possible. One of the reasons that I think we haven't done this is a lot of the distractions that we've been faced with. They say our communication devices, and this was 1981 they were saying this, communication devices and other distractions, such as the less competitive games, have the distortion of preventing the activation of the heart center, because we're not dealing with other people as much. We're just kind of like distracting ourselves from the process. And also the some effect of televisions that have distraction and sleep. They say that the thought forms of our people during this transition to fourth density are quite scattered, instead of becoming able to grasp the needle, shall we say, and point the compass in one direction. And this is causing the entry into the vibration of love or understanding to be not effective within our current social complex. Our society is not handling this well. And I do think that working on disclosure is one way of taking back hold of this needle and getting everyone excited about the reality that we're really living in, and focusing everyone on how we actually are in an amazing, amazing situation right now. I think disclosure is going to be key. Last year, I mentioned that I had commissioned a survey through Google Surveys, which is a relatively objective measurement of the general views of the public. They use many weighted measurements. But I asked on the survey, do you believe extraterrestrials are currently interacting with humanity? And I didn't want just to know how many people believe there's extras out there. I want to know how many people believe they're actually interacting with us right now, which is essentially what our group, our circle is generally understanding. And they said, and I basically got about 15% saying yes, they do believe that, around 20% saying no, and around 40% saying no, and 20% saying maybe. So that 20% plus 15% is really the most ripe ground right now for teaching. But even the people who say no, I don't believe this, they still might be open to evidence. But this final category asked about around, was it 27% said this is ridiculous. And so that's the people where I think we have to work on the most right now, because a lot of people are not open to hearing anything about anything. And I think when I redid this survey in 2018, just a few weeks ago, it basically went down a tiny bit, but it's negligible. I really don't think a lot has changed in the consciousness specifically with this kind of topic, but I think we have a lot that we can be doing. And I think UFO disclosure can be the kind of great societal script rewrite that we need in this drama that we've written. People are still kind of stuck in attitudes of skepticism, as I just showed, eating still a lot of draining foods that keep them dumbed down and have many distractions, and stuck in many, many repeating patterns of energy blockages. But Ross says that they originally were showing up to people in a recent history back in the 50s because of the mystery factor and the unknown quality of what the UFO really represents. They were offering to make people aware of infinite possibility through showing up in the skies. When we grasp infinity, then and only then can the gateway be open to the law of one. And so it's this sense of understanding we don't really know what's going on. They can really break down some of the walls people have right now, I think. And I think that 2018 has been absolutely incredible as a result of what I was described at the beginning with the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which was disclosed back in December. And there's been a lot of new information about this coming out over the last year. There was a Pentagon report on this tic-tac-toe or tic-tac UFO incident that was so heavily reported on back in December. Harry Reid has done some interviews and that I'm going to talk about, and his involvement is very fascinating. But this is really the first time that we have absolute proof that the government is very interested, has been very interested in UFOs because it's real. And a lot of people just couldn't grasp the fact that it was real. And if the government is taking it this seriously, I think putting this in front of people's faces a little bit more can help them take it more seriously. So I think that rather than focus on what people have called a partial disclosure narrative, where they think that some of these disclosures are a result of some very controlled timeline, that very may well be true, to help awaken people according to whatever agenda is behind it, I think that we have to work right now to co-create the disclosure we most want, and that we can work on educating people and using all the resources available, including the AATIP disclosures, to help educate people right now. And I think there's many different examples of how to get involved. Obviously, people are doing a lot on the internet right now that's really great, videos and podcasts. And I also think this is a time we can actually be doing more Freedom of Information Act requests. If you don't know what that is, it's very interesting to recognize all we have to do is ask the government for more information on things. And if we ask the right questions, they actually are obligated by law to send us documents relating to what we just requested, as long as it's not classified, which the AATIP program was apparently not, for the most part. And I also recommend starting a meetup group in your area. We can organize many different types of awareness campaigns. I recommend the DVD method I talked about earlier. And always remember, meditation groups are still always a great way of being involved. Meditation is still the most important thing I think we need to be consistent with. So I want to talk about Harry Reid's involvement because I don't think this got enough attention lately. Harry Reid was into the UFO topic, and none of us knew about it. He was the head of the Senate. He was the Senate Majority Leader back in 2006, 2007, and 2007 was an AATIP program started. And Harry Reid said that in order to get something moving, he had to work with, essentially in secret, with what he calls black money, using ambiguous language, a project to study aerial phenomenon, because he was curious about the UFO phenomenon. He wasn't, you can be the head of the Senate and know absolutely nothing from the military or from the intelligence agencies about the UFO phenomenon because they've got it so blocked away. So he wanted to do his part in trying to figure out how to get this topic a little bit more open, both to the military and to the public. And so what he did, this was a great interview by New York Magazine. He said that they would go ahead and he worked with, I believe it was the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee in the Senate. It was just two guys. He worked with Senator Stevens and Senator Inouye at the time. So really just three guys in the Congress made a gigantic difference by getting this program started to study aerial phenomenon without saying anything like UFOs, because then it might get, raise a red flag. He said he didn't even tell anybody about it because he simply wanted to get something done. He didn't want a debate on the Senate floor that no one understood what the hell they were talking about. So this is an interesting perspective when I finally read this article to realize, Congress might not totally be the problem. It might just be that a lot of Congress people are uninformed on this. And I want to say that this is the time that we could actually work on informing our congressmen more than ever, thanks to these new disclosures. The executive branch is largely unaccountable because of all this obscure bureaucracy. They can just lock something away. We're only voting for the president and vice president when it comes to the executive branch. We don't know about all these other things going on. But with the legislator, we actually do vote for every single decision-making person in the Congress, and we still have influence. They're still interested. There's a midterm election coming up in November. This is a relatively significant time frame when they actually care about what we're thinking about because we're going to be voting for them. At least everyone in the House of Representatives is now up on the ballot. So this is a very significant time. And also, I thought it was interesting, Stephen Greer even tried doing a Facts Your Congressman initiative with his disclosure project a while ago, but that was taken down. Stephen Bassett says that on his website, every social political issue of our time, from landmine proliferation to Gulf War syndrome to environmental degradation, is being lobbied on behalf of the American public 365 days a year. Who would say the politics of disclosure and the truth embargo are not important enough to be included? And so I have created a website, disclosurereviews.org, that I recommend people check out. This is a very easy way. You type in your address or zip code. Generally, you have to type in more than just your zip code. It'll show you your congressman. You can click on their name. You can click on send a free fax, and then you just fill out the form. You can attach documents. It sends a free fax to your congressman. I've made it extremely easy and streamlined. And this is also a way that we can have a repository of all the Congress members' views on disclosure and what the progress has been in trying to communicate with them. So you can send me information about your work in this area if you want to help me with this. We can begin to identify the bottlenecks and also the allies in Congress. Who's willing to help us specifically work on the ET disclosure issue? And we can also, I can also continue to put on better and better resources on here that we can use, and we can understand, what's the methods. Stephen Greer had on his website the idea that, you send a fax 1 week, you wait a week, you follow up with another, and ask what the status of the first one was. And eventually you can even call into the office and say, what's going on? I'd like to get an answer on this. What does my congressman think about this? And then you can get a name of that person who answered the phone. And then in all of your future correspondence, you can refer to that person you talked to on the staff to get it more likely to continue to move through up to make sure that congressman is actually looking at what you send. That's just one kind of strategy. And I've got an example fax here. I don't have time to read it for you, but yeah, okay. You can go on the website, disclosurereviews.org, and get more examples of what I recommend. I definitely recommend putting a heavy emphasis on Trump's proposed Space Force. This is a huge deal that our congressmen have no idea to a large extent what's going on in space with practically any of the military, and they're being asked now to vote, do you want to support a new branch of the military called the Space Force? And these congressmen are absolutely in the dark, and they should not have to be in the dark. So obviously I said this is really significant timing right now. The midterm elections are November 6th, and then we have another event apparently November 11th, which is the military parade and Veterans Day, and we might have some more things being announced relating to what we can be doing to work on disclosure with Congress then. And then in 2020 is when they say the Space Force is they wanting to actually get going. So in February 2019, that's when Congress is actually being sent the budget relating to the Space Force. And Congress should definitely be informed. They need more transparency relating to the secret space programs before they're forced to make that kind of decision. To conclude here, I think that there's always going to be difficulty in breaking through any of these veils that we're dealing with. And this was not designed to be easy for our own benefit, our own growth potentials. Our biggest challenges serve as a reminder to elevate our consciousness and rise to the occasion. So I think it's time to break through all these veils to be of the greatest service to others. And to elevate our perspective continually, I think, is extremely important. We find ways to see everything in terms of opportunities for love and service, and that we appreciate the spiritual catalyst that we offer to others when we help them awaken. We continue to do our part in radiating the love of the Creator in our own way. And I'll end with this quote from Ra. May we ask the student to look up and behold the glory, the might, the majesty, the mystery, and the peace of oneness. Let no consideration of bird or beast, darkness or light, shape or shadow keep any which seeks from the central consideration of unity. Thanks.